Forward 50 proudly presents G Factor, the policy pitch competition. Ever had a great idea you wish would get widespread adoption? That's why we are hosting our first ever policy pitch game show. Here to explain how this will happen is a familiar face, so we thought we'd show it to you from a different angle. Forward 50 co-founder and chair, Alistair Kroll. Running this crazy adventure for us is none other than Director of Digital Strategy at the Nova Scotia Digital Service, Megan Beretta, your host and one of the masterminds behind G Factor. Please welcome Alistair and Megan.
Hey, Megan. You should be bigger. You're the host here. I'm just driving things behind the scenes.
Well, let's kick off and welcome back to Channel One, everyone, and to our first ever G Factor. This unique policy pitch competition came from our very real experiences in digital government. My colleagues Graham Rivers and Honey Dakanai from Service Canada and I were always reaching out to other departments saying, how do you do user compensation? Or here's how we got the justification to use the software. And frankly, it took too much time and energy for things that should already be part of our practices. How could we scale these network of knowledge? We also wondered how we could raise the voices of folks doing the work and thought, where does our digital government community? And so we pitched our G Factor competition, and that brings us here today. We knew we needed judges who have influence and impact in government and excellent pitches from the motivated public servants getting digital government to happen. And wow, are we impressed with those who showed up to pitch and to judge. Today, you will see public servants pitch policy ideas and judges who will ultimately choose pitches to sponsor. Those judges are committed to working with the winner over the next year to make this policy a reality in their level of government. We're asking these judges to use their ability to sponsor an idea to make it happen and report back next year at Forward 50. We are going to start with the fabulous Emma Okuni, who is the Chief Data Officer at Employment and Social Development Canada, also known as the STC. She has over 21 years of experience in the field of data. Emma, can you tell us today why you decided to take part in the G Factor competition and what you're looking for today?
Oh, first of all, thanks, Meg, and thanks for hosting us in this really important show, I think. I mean, my question would be, why not? Why not? I mean, this is an opportunity, I think, to really hear pitches that can change the public service. So to me, it's a question of why not. And what I'm looking for really is opportunities to really see what we can do to really shift how we serve Canadians, how we can improve services to Canadians, policy making, program design, and really looking for factors around, inclusion, like the inclusive aspect of serving all our entire population, because that's where I sit within ESDC, and also looking for ways that we can improve outcomes in how we deliver services and policies to Canadians. So really looking forward to this exciting event, and thanks Alistair and Rebecca for putting this together. I think it's an excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And up next, we have Jean-François Fleury. He's the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Research, Planning and Renewal Sector at Treasury Board Canada. And Jean-François, what motivated you to take part in G Factor? Oh, you're just on mute.
That starts off perfectly. No, I'm really, really happy to be here. My title is quite bureaucratic, but it's essentially to try to develop the strategy for the future of work from a people management perspective in the public service, and clearly and more importantly than ever, linking and integrating people strategies and digital strategies have to become one. So I'm really excited to be here, really excited to see the pitches, and really excited to represent the people management function, but from a different perspective, one that is much more forward-thinking and anchored in digital acumen.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here today with us, Jean-François. And finally, our last judge is Hilary Hartley. And Hilary is Ontario's Chief Digital and Data Officer and is the Deputy Minister who heads up the Ontario Digital Service within Ontario's Treasury Board Secretariat. Hilary, what brought you here today?
Hi, Meg. Hi, Alistair. Good to see you both. Really excited to be part of this today. And I think at the end of the day, both of my co-judges summed it up well. And I will just say, I'm really interested in seeing what's on the policy side of digital and how you all want to help teams like mine bring digital into the policy program world and be thinking about how to make government more digital, how to make our environments, our work programs, et cetera, our work environments, et cetera, more digital and looking into the future.
Thanks so much, Hillary. Now, we're almost ready to go. One last thing I wanted to say is that this game show is explicitly about putting great digital government ideas into the spotlight. We're here to ask those watching to use those ideas, to grab them and keep pushing on them, and to frankly put pressure on all levels of government to adopt policies that will enable digital government. It's time to bring ideas that we have been pushing behind the scenes into the public. So please take these ideas and run with them, even if they are not the winners today. These are all things that we're going to benefit from talking about in the open. So if you're ready to make change happen, let's go. Our first policy pitch today is brought to us by Stephanie Figgis of Service Canada. Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Figgis, and today I will talk to you about the future. Imagine that you were just handed an opportunity of a lifetime. After years of dedication and hard work, you were given a new mandate to revolutionize the way your department delivers services. You love the opportunity you have to make a real difference, and you're known to be innovative, and you have a proven track record of success. You're not afraid of challenges. This is exactly the kind of opportunity you dream of. So, why are you horrified when your boss gives you that mandate? I know why, and I'm sure everyone here does too. It's because you know that at best, you have only a 13% chance of success. You know you're doomed to fail, and you also know why. You know that you will go for a commercial off-the-shelf product thinking that it will save money, but that it'll easily end up costing at least more than double the initial plan cost and lock you into a specialized environment and need specialized skills to operate, which means that you'll have to rely on expensive contractors that will easily end up costing at least 30% more than government employees. You know that you will spend at least a year planning, and because of the way projects are funded and resources procured, that you will be forced to make a lot of decisions about what's required before being able to discover what you actually need and put your resources into working on the highest value outcomes. And by the time you start building, your entire landscape may have changed. And you know that once you've cut the ribbon on your transformation, that the majority of the people and resources will leave you to go work on another project. And perhaps most terrifyingly, you know that these are not the only problems or even their root causes. And you become afraid that you will almost certainly end up like your peers before you if you don't do something radically different. Judges, friends, and colleagues, people need their government to deliver programs and services that serve their needs cost effectively. So it is upon us as public servants to make sure that we don't allow transformational projects to fail by allowing them to get too big and locked in, and therefore continuing the cycle of repeating the same mistakes and needing to do future large transformations. Yes, that's right, judges, friends, and colleagues. I am proposing that we ban large digital transformation projects. That's not to say that we don't need to transform, but we need to wake up and realize that the policies, processes, and structures that we use to carry out this important work doom us to failure rather than facilitate our success. And here's the secret: the smaller the project, the greater the chances of success and value delivered. Did you know that according to Standish Group research, that a collection of $1 million projects would return 10 times the value of a collection of $5 million projects? Think of how many pilot projects you could have delivered in place of projects like the Email Transformation Initiative or even the original cost of Phoenix. And judges, friends, and colleagues, I believe that the key to successful transformation lies in shifting to a culture of product management with a results-based approach. Product management starts small and is focused on uncovering the needs of the user, using prototypes, experiments, and pilots to validate ideas before committing to expensive features. And starting small is good because, according to the research, 57% of small government projects are successful, with another 29% challenged. But even challenged, that means we're in a position to iterate and improve. And in product management, resources don't leave when something's been released. They stay with the product and continue to improve it and develop new value streams, and thereby breaking the cycle of needing to do large transformation projects. So judges, friends, and colleagues, the choice is yours. You can continue to do the same thing and think that you fall in that less than 13% who succeed, or you can make the choice to stop large government projects with a one-size-fits-all solution that lock you into specialized environment, and instead shift to product management, stand up cross-functional teams that stick with the product and continually improve it give yourself an 86% chance that you will end up with something to build on and break the cycle of failures for good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Now, Alistair is going to put the poll on in the background so that everyone can go on Mentimeter and vote on it. And we're bringing in the judges to comment and ask questions. Judges, what do you have to say to Stephanie?
Go ahead, Hillary.
Well, just that this is exciting. And this is exactly what I think teams like mine and digital services teams are at base. In addition to trying to promote, having the user at the center of everything, we're trying to promote starting small. Just get started, something small, that skateboard versus the wheels on a chassis of a car, deliver value early and then add features. So ride on with your vision. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate the data. I kind of like the stats and the success factor percentage, quite important. The one question I have very quickly, though, is I agree with the principle, but how would you go about banning this massive boat that is moving big projects and big transformations? How do you go from your end outcome while banishing something that is just so massive and that exists?
Absolutely. So it's really treating projects not as projects, but as actual operations. So start small instead of a large gating process. Prove that you have $1 million of funding. See what you can do with 1 million. If you can be successful for 1 million, you can get more rather than trying to actually have a large project. So when it comes down to it, it's really the policy on projects and just essentially not allowing projects that are that large unless there is an extraordinary circumstance.
Thank you.
And Emma, were you able to hear all of Stephanie's presentation? Did you have any comments?
Yes, no, I really found this very insightful, your approach to breaking things down into chunks. The question I had was around looking at the outcomes. I didn't hear much in terms of how you would assess the outcomes, because in reality, the current state, we're in a very short cycle in terms of really being able to report on results and really show progress. So I would just like to know more around your thinking around that. How would you make that connection to keep the engagement, and the momentum to get more funding to continue?
Absolutely. So at the start, if you do more of a logic model-based approach where you're identifying your ultimate goal and the activities that you need to get to that goal, then you can set your key performance indicators. And then when you start small, you can go and start seeing whether or not your change is actually moving the marker on those key performance indicators.
That's helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you, judges, and thank you, Stephanie, for kicking us off with such a big vision for digital government.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're headed to our next contestant. Also from Service Canada is Sidra Mahmood, and please take it away.
Hi, friends. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to click share on my screen with y'all. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to present, and Stephanie did amazing. Okay, so Government of Canada Service Monitoring. Here's me. I've been at ESDC now for exactly 1 month as design lead under benefits delivery and modernization. I've lived in a whole bunch of places, but Toronto couldn't get rid of me if it tried. And I care a lot about open data and government transparency. So I want to run you through just my agenda. I'm going to go over some scenarios to contextualize the issue. I'm going to tell you kind of a little bit about the context. Then I'm going to give you my policy pitch and with a quick and dirty wireframe of an implementation. So essentially, scenario one, COVID happens. It's a terrible time for everybody. This person loses their job. They're not eligible for EI because they were contracting and self-employed. In June, they applied for emergency benefits, but they needed to update their proof of address. They called every single day for months on end. And as we all know, lines were pretty much packed up. And then by September, finally, their tech issue that's causing them to not be able to update their address finally works. So they're able to prove their identity. And then by November, they get their first check. But it's funny because by the time they get their emergency benefit, they've started their new job. So they've gotten it a couple months later. Second scenario, person's applying for their passport. They've called and it turns out they filled out the wrong form. So they have to go in person to the office, make an appointment. Debit machine is down. They've wasted a bunch of time and money. They go back and then they get told to come back on another day. They call the phone line to make sure that everything's working, wait for 2 hours, and then they show up when they get told their passport's ready. And it turns out it's their lunch hour, and then the person's waiting, and then the printer's not working, so they have to kind of come back another day. And then finally, day 15, get their passport. This is both me. These are both things that happen to me. And that's why I'm actually quite passionate about this work, because if you really think about it, I missed out on $8,000 of emergency benefits that I could have used at the time. I wasted about 11 and a half working hours on the phone trying to just get information about different services, spend about 9.5 hours total on the phone. I had 3.5 meltdowns. I vividly remember those. And I've wasted a lot of money on Ubers because I don't know how to drive. And it's just like very frustrating, right? So we've got a lot of constraints in service delivery, right? We can't pause or stop our services to make them better. We also are kind of under the lens of digital transformation, and that takes a long time because it's very moves at a very slow pace, because we all have a very different understanding of what digital transformation means. And we have significant constraints around the fact that we use legacy software in government a lot to manage things, and a lot of waterfall approaches. We're kind of being shoved to work agilely inside a bunch of waterfall constructs. It's quite tricky. And if you're asking me, like between you and I, our big secret, we are plagued with predatory software procurement, long-term consulting contracts that are like 10 years old, where we have to kind of invent work for them to do, and giant projects. Shout out to Stephanie, who just presented because she was on the money. And basically what it stands is that we've got unique users with unique needs. They access their services through a dimension of different channels. There's a big digital divide. And honestly, like transforming a form into a PDF does not digital government make. There's a lot of little pieces. And so while we're trying to get there, you should know that for Service Canada, at least, tech issues are the most reported issue on our feedback forms. So it's not a matter of like usability and things like that for the most part. It's also really hard to tell us when you're having an issue. You could wait out forever on the phone and then talk to somebody who's not tech support because they're a service agent. There's no real way for users to report an issue to get feedback or a response. The message goes kind of into the ether, and we only really accept, as a government and a lot of services, we accept one-way structured feedback. So who hears about tech issues when people are having them instead, right? Service agents hear about them, and they are limited in how much they can help. And then people go to social media. And if you search Service Canada on social media, you'll see what I'm talking about. So at the crux of it all, like everybody loves a surprise, right? However, government services shouldn't be surprises. People can't shop around. People need these essential services, right? And so like when we can't fix things because it's going to take 10 years to transform and consolidate all of our services under one big, beautiful, hopefully open source umbrella, we should manage expectations to make people's lives easier. And this is where my policy proposal comes in. What if we had a Government Canada-wide framework for omnichannel service and system status monitoring? Let me give you some examples because that's a mouthful. So basically, monitoring things and telling people the status of things is a really good way to amplify our customers so that they can actually do things and plan their lives around the things that they need to get done when things aren't working. So really, it's like, we'll tell you what's up so that you can plan around it. It is sustainable as an approach and fairly scalable. There would be a decrease in tech support calls because people would know what service is currently not up, so they know that the issue is not on their end. I think it would foster more thoughtful cross-channel work. When we change something on the digital side, what do we need to change on the other implementations of that process? And I think it would increase client trust of government, so it doesn't seem like we're trying to hide something all the time. And I think ultimately would improve actual service standards. So what does this look like, right? It's about giving clients what they need to plan, right? So essentially, we know, like, you know, on Google, you get a histogram of like what the popular times are for certain things, or, you know, when the elevator's out of order. Let's do that. Right now, we do some of that internally. Right now, if you work for ESDC, you get a little status monitor on what the VPN status is, right? Similarly, embedded deep within the CRA, we've got service maintenance details as well. And then, you know, you'll see private sector tools like Slack. They have a really helpful service and status monitor, and I love that. So on our end, what is it that we could report? Well, I think one, in-person services, tell people when the lunch hour is, be consistent about what it looks like on the locations, accessibility, bathrooms, changing tables. People are taking time out of there to do these things. Let them know if a web service is down, if a regular service is down, if a mail-in service is down. Let them know what payment types are expected as well. For phone services, best times to call. We have some of this information. I think we should just leverage it to deliver it in a better way, and that's easier to find for our customers. I would love to see more historical data and more real-time call volume data, as opposed to like end-of-year reports, things like accessibility. And on the digital channel, product downtime, alternatives for when something is down.
Hey, Sidra, your 5 minutes is up. I'm sorry.
No worries. Here's a quick sneak peek at what that could potentially look like.
Thank you. You did a very good job speaking very quickly. Sidra is well known to speak at the speed of light and presenting quickly. And I certainly was sweating when you were describing those bad service experience. So we've all been there. Judges, do you want to come on in and ask Sidra some questions or give some comments? Take it away, Hillary, if you have any.
Sure. I love the list of suggestions. I think to me, the work and the hard part would be kind of standardizing that. thinking about the data standard and the framework that you'd put forward for folks, and be pushing to, if you're not capturing certain things, how do you capture them? And for the MVP, what are those things out of your list of suggestions that you could put forward?
Ema, do you have any feedback?
Oh, yes. Great job in really being client-centric. I like your approach in terms of how you described the problem. You were very good at being very specific at what the issue was. My question is more around in putting this into practice, like execution. One of the challenges we need to think through is inclusiveness of how we deliver these digital services to clients, like our entire population, and some of the impact this would have on the population, because we need to make sure that we're not creating barriers for certain segments of the population. So I'm just wondering how you thought through that and thought through the privacy challenges and then the trust connected to user sentiment over use of digital tools. Just high level, that's kind of what's on my mind.
I think that's an excellent question. I'm really glad you asked that. And I guess in a nutshell, like I think a lot of it lies in, I think, the ways in which we capture information from our customers and then the ways in which we evaluate, analyze, and then kind of take that insight and turn it into action. So obviously, I think something like this, in order to standardize, it needs to be scoped pretty heavily, and the needs vary from like what task it is you're trying to do. But I think in the interest of inclusion, like I think the big point is based on our research, almost 25% of the people that access at least the Service Canada services when they're online, they're not accessing them for themselves. They're actually looking up information for somebody else, or they're just doing some research out of general interest, or they're just trying to find answers that they haven't been able to find through other channels. And I think relying too heavily on the digital channel excludes actually a fair number of those folks, particularly people that are within communities that typically, are a little bit more marginalized. We specifically work right now on old age security, so we're learning a lot right now and research about this specific audience. And there is a lower level of digital trust, like they are reading their passwords out loud to their family member. But I think it actually depends on the audience, and I think it builds a really strong case for intersectional research that isn't just based on economic outcomes, which I feel like a lot of policy analysis does. I think incorporating things like the GBA Plus framework and thinking about inclusion and actually thinking about how to meaningfully kind of combine qualitative and quantitative insights into what it means to deliver services in an equitable way is probably the way to start. I don't believe that one size fits all. Absolutely not. Like I think there's a lot of value in creating more personalized services for people's unique needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. And JF, what do you think from a Treasury Board perspective about this kind of standardization?
Well, I mean, first of all, I imagine that there's not a lot of time, so I can't ask too many questions. I'll just say two things. I really like the authenticity of your pitch and the real life experience. And I really like the driver of the pitch, which is really anchored in user centricity. And I think that both those things combined make the pitch quite compelling. Although I agree with comments that were made, there are a lot of things to kind of dig through there to get to the end destination, but you never go wrong with authenticity and user centricity.
Thank you so much. And thank you, judges. And thanks, Sidra, for your compelling pitch. Okay, up next, we have Eve Cabert from the Treasury Board and the Federal Youth Network. Eve, come on up. And just a strict reminder, we will be counting your 5 minutes. Take it away.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Megan. Hi, judges. I'm so pleased to be here today. And I'm here today to talk to you about Beyond, which is an enterprise solution to an enterprise challenge. You know that we have a problem with onboarding. And you might be thinking, okay, but like we already have it. Is there really a problem? Yes. The big issue with onboarding as it stands right now in the government of Canada is that the way we work has changed so dramatically, but the way that we onboard new hires, frankly, hasn't. So imagine this, an innovative platform that enables users to contribute to an open, accessible, and common onboarding repository that employees and managers alike can use to support their individual and collective needs. It's a platform that's accessible, intuitive, inclusive, and open by design. It's a platform that embodies the areas of focus for Beyond 2020. It's agile, it's inclusive, it's equipped. Ultimately, it's an innovative solution to a longstanding problem. The numbers show just how much of an impact onboarding has on employee and organizational success. First of all, a good onboarding process has an enormous impact on employee retention. It's actually up to an 82% increase in new hire retention. Employee satisfaction was also found to be 30 times higher in jobs with a great onboarding system as opposed to an average counterpart. Building on that, happy and satisfied employees are 13% more productive than their counterparts. But on the flip side, a disengaged and unsatisfied employee will cost an employer an estimated 34% of their salary. And this comes between higher rates of absenteeism and lower productivity. A negative onboarding experience also results in employees being twice as likely to look for other opportunities within their first year of employment. And the kicker that really sums all of this up is that 88% of employees feel that their organizations don't onboard well. So we often talk about recruitment and retention, and a strong onboarding process is clearly a critical piece to building an engaged workforce. And so I want to tell you a little story now, because I know that we've all heard it at least once. It's your first day at a new job, and maybe this is 3 years ago. Somebody comes to get you in the lobby, they give you a tour of the office, and then you get handed a literal stack of paper to read at your empty desk while you wait for your computer to arrive. Or maybe, like me, you started a new job remotely. On day one, you go to open your computer and you don't have VPN access or email access. You can't get on the network to fill out the forms to get network access because you don't have network access, but you can't get onto your email without getting on the network. And so before you know it, you've lost an entire day, but more importantly, your organization lost out on your talent too. This problem has been around for a long time. And so we started talking about it in July, and we just knew that there had to be other people who had frustrations. So enter the onboarding community of practice. It's a community of members from 44 departments who share a common goal, which is making onboarding better for everyone. And what we heard from them is that onboarding is inconsistent. There's a white glove service for executives that some departments have mirrored for employees. For example, CDS has a great, comprehensive, and accessible onboarding process that you can find on Google Drive. I found it when I Googled it, but it's very much luck of the draw, and it's on a department-to-department basis. There's also no standard for quality content or process. Despite the fact that public servants work for the Government of Canada, it is one single employer, information differs based on the onboarding department. And this can cause issues later on when employees transfer department, as there's no common understanding as to what employees should already know, which contributes to skill imbalances. So this isn't just a problem at the beginning of an employee's journey in the public service. This is also an issue when we look at cross-boarding. The content is also extremely confusing. It's full of unfriendly acronyms that often leave new hires confused. And more than that, there's no common repository. Information that should be unprotected is hidden behind firewalls in inaccessible formats, which results in multiple departments going and creating the same resource, which is a huge amount of wasted work when we could just be sharing the information that we have. And so this kind of brings me to beyond. It goes beyond from what we've heard from our community of practice. We all know what people think about the Canadian public service. Our reputation is that we're slow, that new hires will often never start on their start date, that not getting paid is the norm. And the fact of the matter is these things do happen. A negative onboarding experience reinforces negative stereotypes about the public service. But on the flip side, creating an intentional and high quality enterprise-wide onboarding platform is an opportunity for us to course correct. With over 60,000 people hired into the public service in the 2019 to 2020 fiscal year, fixing our onboarding process is more important than ever. So what is Beyond? It's a web-based, accessible, collaborative platform that supports an enterprise-wide approach to onboarding. It's accessible off-network, that's open by design for partners to use, and it evolves with the evolving needs of our public service. So what do we need from you? Your support. Onboarding is a priority and needs to be treated like such. And this starts with senior leadership support, and this starts with policy development. Then we need the talent, an intact team of policy pros, UX designers, learning experts, and technical folks who will work to develop a custom solution with custom content. We need the time, we need the funding to make this project a reality, with the goal to roll it out in phases, first to the core public service, then to all who want access. We need the tools to support to build a platform that really fits our needs as public servants and shows people just what being a public servant can be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ev. And I remember those days of showing up and not even a computer at an empty desk. So you're filling a need and talking about retention of the talent that is so important to the digital government movement. So judges, do you want to come on out and give your comments and questions to Ev? We'll kick off this time with you, Jeff.
Well, I really like the pitch, like your enthusiasm, and do think that onboarding is more important than ever and will be more important than ever as we move towards different ways of working, distributed workforce models, working in different jurisdictions, and hopefully having a lot of employees moving around from organization to organization and kind of having a similar lived experience as a public servant. So I like the scale. I like the fact that we're not promoting any type of duplication. And onboarding matters. My only concern would be how messy that space could be and the level of resources it could take to keep it alive, up to date, and always very relevant. Those are not constraints, they're just considerations that I think are quite important if we are to move towards an enterprise onboarding approach. But I love the concept.
Great points, JF. And Ima, do you want to go next? Thoughts for Ev?
Yes, Ev, I really thought the way you described your approach was excellent. You talked about collaboration, horizontality, inclusiveness. I mean, I really loved that about your pitch. Also liked that you paid emphasis on curation because it's important to curate information. And my question again is around the lines of that. Like, how would you keep that curation going? How would you really get smaller departments, for example, to buy into the idea due to the cost of maintenance of an idea? But I thought it was excellent the way you approached this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And it's actually one that we talked a lot about with our community of practice because we have these conversations. And this is actually why we're here to build a custom platform because we couldn't find a platform that would work that was user friendly. We looked at GC Exchange, but it's not accessible to folks who are off network. We looked at GitHub, but it's really, really confusing to update. We looked at things like it's a site called Pressbooks. We looked at an ebook, but you can't update those. And so I think this is in two parts. Part of it is a team, and part of it is kind of really enshrining that policy and developing that so that there are folks who work on a dedicated team who support this platform. But the other part of it is that what we're doing right now is honestly super expensive. You know, if every single department and every single HR onboarding team is developing their own resources, ultimately that costs the public service way more than it does to have one central repository. So it's an investment upfront, yes, but in the long term, the savings are there because the information isn't being duplicated. And so you take, you have 44 different people who are working on this project, you streamline it into a team of maybe 7 or 8 people whose job is to maintain the content and who become those points of contact. So really, it's something that kind of contributes to that idea of like you have these points of contact, you have people who moderate it, but you eliminate a huge duplication of work.
Really good point about sunk costs that are already there. And Hillary.
We're probably running out of time, so I'll just say that I agree the framing of your pitch was fantastic. Starting off with a really clear statement and value proposition, really clear pitch and a clear focus. So thank you for that. You ran through some stats. Would have been nice to actually see those because I was frantically trying to write some of them down because I agree with this problem and I agree with the fact that onboarding is only going to continue to get more complicated in the next era of how we work. So it would have been great to, kind of actually have some of those at my fingertips. I think really important to emphasize the accessible off network. Government is not easy to join, period. So love that. It takes however long to make sure you've got your laptop, your whatever, your VPN, this, that, and the other. So love that focus.
Thank you.
Fabulous. And thank you so much, judges. And thank you so much, Ev. Okay, up next, joining us from the Public Service and Procurement Canada is Germaine Aoun. Germaine, take it away.
Hi, it's a great honor to join the G-Factor Policy Pitch Competition. My name is Germaine Aoun. I'm ecstatic to pitch my idea today, the Organizational Results Delivery Capacity Assessment, also known as the ORDCA. I did make up the acronym, and I can assure you it is aligned with Canada federal government's preference for mouthful acronyms. Recent policy changes have increased the accountability on achieving results in the Canadian federal government. This is noted in the 2016 updated policy on results, the 2019 updated policy on the management and planning of investments, the public mandate letters and their tracker showcased here, the GC Infobase, and others. Overall, the federal government is seemingly showing good progress on the mandate letter commitments and delivering results to Canadians. For the international and non-feds audience here, mandate letters contain commitments that the Prime Minister is asking its appointed ministers to deliver on during their terms. And as you can see, we're achieving many of these commitments, and this is a great story to tell. However, when we look at the GC Infobase extract, GC Infobase being an open government platform showcasing departmental results and associated spend, we notice that the story is not as great at the departmental level. Out of the 2,777 results indicator that were put forward by several federal government departments for 2019-2020, only 48% of them were actually met. This is an abysmal F grade by any standard. The message here is that the federal government or federal department, apologies, are failing at achieving results that they committed to achieve. And those results may or may not be linked to the mandate letter commitments that showed a higher success rate. And if departments are not achieving results, we can assume that Canadians are not necessarily getting the services that they were promised. So where are we going wrong? Even when we slice and dice the departmental results dataset completely differently, we see that approximately 60% of departments have achieved less than 60% of their results in 2019-2020. Now that's a tweet. And these are departments with big budgets, big mandates, and very important results to deliver. To name a few, National Defense, Employment Social Development Canada, Global Affairs Canada, Transport Canada, Health Canada, Treasury Board Secretariat, Innovation, Science, Economic Development, Public Services Procurement Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Department of Indigenous Services, and many others. All of these have achieved less than 60% of their results in 2019-2020. So are we spending the budget in the wrong areas? Are we choosing the wrong results? Are our indicators even reflective of the results? And are the departmental results aligned to the mandate letter commitments? And more importantly, what are we doing with all of this information we're collecting? Are we holding the departments accountable to their commitments? Are we helping the struggling departments? Are we walking the talk as public servants? So to start tackling these questions, I'm pitching a new policy tool, the Organizational Results Delivery Capacity Assessment, that would define a department's capacity to deliver on committed results. The ORDCA would derive from the policy and results and would be accompanied by the Program Complexity Assessment, also new. The end result here is a departmental score, the ORDCA, on a scale of 1 to 4 that scores a department's capacity to deliver on results in general, and the PCA, also on a scale of 1 to 4, that scores a specific program's complexity. The logic is simple. A department with the ORDCA is capable to consistently deliver on results on programs that have a same level or lower PCA, but will require additional oversight and accountability when they're trying to deal with a program that has a higher PCA, i.e., a program that is more complex. The ORDCA and PCA would only be the first policy step towards achieving key benefits for Canadians. They'll ensure that departmental results are clearly mapped to mandate letter commitments, that SMART objectives will ensure stronger accountability and thus increased effectiveness. It will inform executives on budget justification, transformation initiatives, or drastic interventions, and it'll improve the motivation among public servants and inform talent throughout their career path. And with this, I thank you for listening to me, and I hope that I G-factored you today.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Wow, the data nerd in me is absolutely stirring, as is that results nerd. This is a really exciting and very different proposal. So let's invite the judges in. We'll start with our Treasury Board friend, JF, on this one. I want to hear what you have to say about this proposal.
So everyone who works at Treasury Board has the same mandate, right? Which is performance measurement. But no, I like the proposal. I do have a couple of questions though, because, results sometimes don't happen for many contextual and external reasons. And I think that something like this has merit, but how do you actually factor in or quantify the context, the pressures, the change in direction that happens in real life in order to make sure that the score doesn't just reflect the result without understanding the difficult path to get there? And of course, the agile iterative approach that we're all promoting on how to get there does sometimes take us off the original path. So I'm just curious to see in your arithmetic, how does that show up?
Yep. So great question, JF. The idea here is that these kind of discussions will happen, we'll have some governance involved in there. and the results can change based on a direction change, based on a mandate change. This is normal in government. Things are supposed to change. And when they do change, that change has to be reflected in the right reporting areas so that you can showcase if you have achieved the results, even if it has changed. So a small change in a result, justified change, obviously approved by the higher powers, is still considered a successful achievement if it's correctly achieved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Hillary and Ima, you have 2 minutes each. We'll start with Ima, our data guru.
Okay, 2 minutes is not enough, but I'll try my best. I mean, Jermaine, as I was listening to you, what was going through my head is I need to have a further conversation with you because I was thinking through a lot as you spoke. And part of what I was thinking through is the data element. So within the government of Canada, we have challenges in terms of really getting insight out of data and really being able to measure some of these results in a way that makes sense. And you spoke to this. So part of my question is that, how do we walk through that issue around data and really making sure that what we're reflecting as under 60% is actually true? Are we measuring the right things? So that's where my questions kind of landed. And I could go on for 2 more hours, but I know I don't have time. So we can follow up offline on how you thought through this. I want to know more.
I would love to have follow-up chats, Ima. The idea here is that I've scored through a bit of the results that we have online, and some of them do represent some of what the departments are supposed to do. But going into each department's heads and the groups who are developing the results is something I don't have access to, except in my own department and departments I worked with. And I can tell you from my experience, short experience in the public sector, but long experience in the private sector with the government, however, as a consultant, people are afraid of putting the right things on paper. People don't want to be accountable in general. And that's the kind of thing that I hope we can change when we talk about open government, when we talk about showing everyone what we can achieve. A recent policy change that introduced the concept of benefits management for projects is actually starting to change this whole concept. We're no longer looking at just building a building or finishing a software on time, on scope, on budget. That whole talk is switching now to are we actually achieving the right outcomes? So that cultural change is happening right now. And if we do want to make our results and our data with more insight, now is the time to do it.
Okay, Hillary.
Was actually thinking a little bit along the same lines as Ima. And so I will ask a potentially tough question, and you certainly can't answer it in a minute and a half, but just curious about some of the KPIs that you think, we would be targeting. And more specifically, what's your minimum viable dashboard? Like, what do you think you just start with?
So I would start with the bigger common KPIs across the government, something like Indigenous participation or reconciliation. Let's put a number on that and let's figure out what that is. It doesn't have to be perfect from day one, but at least let's start with something that is common across everyone, across all departments, and let's make sure we have the good definitions altogether. And I think these type of discussions haven't happened, or maybe they're happening in the background, but at least from a data perspective, from what's showing up on GC Infobase, you see multiple measures, multiple KPIs that could be condensed and trying to measure the same things.
Fabulous. Well, thank you all for your comments and questions and grilling Germain there. It sounds like we've made some good connections. We have Andrea Baquet and Andrea is coming from Service Canada. We've got Service Canada showing up strong here today. So Andrea, please take it away. You've got.
Thanks, Megan. Appreciate it. Can everybody see my screen? Awesome. Thank you. Well, good afternoon and bonjour. My name is Andrea Baquet, and I'm a new public servant. I joined the federal government in January. I come to this role with 30 years of industry background and experience in various executive leadership roles. I've been fortunate to be on the forefront of some leading next generation technologies and innovations, delivering massive digital transformations. And so I couldn't be more proud to be part of Employment Services Development Canada's Benefit Delivery Modernization Program. And I'm here today to pitch an idea that actually isn't a novel one. It's pretty basic and pretty simple, but I think and I hope that you're going to agree with me that it's an important one. So as we go through the next few, 4 minutes left together, I'm going to ask you to keep focus on this one question, and that is whether or not you feel linguistic diversity could be a strategic lever to accelerating digital transformation for Canada. BDM has a strategic outcome really to deliver for, with, and to our clients better access and better service quality. And it's really with the goal of doing so through an improved digital service experience. As we enable citizens to be doing more self-service digitally, I think it's imperative that we look to design an experience that is centered around their language of choice. And I'd like to explain why. Because 1 in 5 Canadians are foreign-born. Because by 2030, immigration will account for 80% of Canada's population growth. Today, our First Nations populations make up almost 5% of the population and is growing 4 times faster than the rest of the country. And most importantly, as our population ages, immigrants will be the primary factor in growing and expanding Canada's labor force. So you might be wondering, don't we do this today? And for some parts of our Service Canada regions, like the Western region as an example here today, we serve 11 million Canadians in over 200 languages across 220 Service Canada centers and scheduled outreach sites. In the Northwest Territories, in respect of the Inuit Language Protection Act, Service Canada actually provides in-person service in Inuktitut 100% of the time. BC government recently, with their COVID-19 response website, delivered in 13 languages their services. These provide great precedent. The fact of the matter is we're just not doing this consistently. I would like you to meet Nemo Ramos. Now, to protect her identity, this is a fictional character, but she is based on a true story in my community. Nemo immigrated to Canada in 1983. She's been a hairstylist for 30 years, but she missed out of 7 months of the Canadian Emergency Response Benefits, the CERB, simply because she could not complete the form online. Now Nemo's got a great conversational English, sufficient to get by every day in her working life, but she's never actually learned how to read or write in English. Nemo's not alone. So let's imagine a future state for Nemo. Let's put ourselves 12 years from now. Nemo's 65 and she's going to be applying for OAS and CPP benefits. Imagine where she signs on to the servicecanada.ca website and she's actually guided through an experience so that she can determine her eligibility and her entitlement for benefits, even as she's served with a virtual assistant, but all in Tagalog, her birth language. This is completely doable. There's open source softwares like Wedgelot that exist today that can actually, at the press of a button, translate websites, entire websites, into over 100 languages. Companies like IBM, Shopify, Bluetooth, even WordPress uses in their content management platform, Wedgelot, to translate their content. The technology's there, it's available, and it's free to use. So I ask you, moving forward, is linguistic diversity a lever for us? A simple one at that. Sometimes when we think about transformations, we think big, we think bold. But in my opinion, these are the small steps we need to take so that we actually design the future state of service delivery for Canadians and citizens. I urge you to ask me questions and also perhaps pick my pitch so that we can work on this together, because I would really look forward to that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrea. And that was a fantastic and simple pitch that I think resonates with many. Judges, if you can come on up, let's hear what you have to say. Hillary, we'll go with you first because you've been last before. Go ahead, Hillary.
Sure. Thanks so much, Andrea. Our team manages Ontario.ca, so we think a lot about this. And one of the things that always comes up is those services that at the press of a button do the translation. How it doesn't feel personal. It doesn't feel like we've actually put in the effort to make sure that we're posing the question the right way versus, a Google Translate type version of it. So just curious if you've done research or, user research around this in terms of some of those specific communities that obviously we can't hire 100 different translators. We don't have the FTEs or the bandwidth to do that. So we focus on the languages, the 2 official languages, and then maybe the ones that have the most prominence in our provinces. I'm curious if you've done any user research with folks that would benefit from this, and if it's perceived that, if folks see and understand that perhaps the translation is a little bit off, and if it's still worth it to them to even have that kind of not wrong version, but I hope you understand the gist of the question.
Okay, so I think I'd answer it two ways. One, I am proposing that we start with a digital transformation here, not necessarily in-person service delivery, although I think eventually we could get there in time. And I have some ideas on that I'd love to share in more detail. I think that the technology is there now to actually have a very high degree of accuracy in the translation digitally. I think it's been proven, and I think the examples would be that large companies like IBM and Shopify are using it, and they're not actually hiring linguistic translators to do this. They're relying on the technology. I think there is some, customization we're going to need to do the website templates. We need to make sure that as we move between languages, we're actually looking at placement and making sure that words that might be longer in appearance are still going to appear quite nicely on the page. But I think that's, some usability testing that we can easily do to address.
Thank you so much. JF, what do you think?
Well, I love the fact that your pitch is anchored in a true inclusive reality of how Canada is and where we're going. And I think that how we deliver our services to Canadians and having that inclusive lens, the language lens, is almost a must. We have, our two official languages in Canada, but we have a responsibility towards all Canadians to ensure that they understand what we're trying to do to help them in whatever situation it is. And I do agree that technology has gone a long way. There'll always be a human impact, though, in terms of translation, especially if it's specific programming. One technical word that has been, badly translated could create massive issues. But the concept of trying to achieve linguistic diversity, c'est louable. Oh, I went to French there, sorry. I don't even know what that word is in English, but it's driven for the right reasons. And it's anchored in a real situation here in Canada. So kudos to your pitch.
Thanks, JF. Appreciate that.
Thanks, JF. And we see that diversity in action in the English and French commentary. And last email, you've got 1 minute.
Thanks, Andrea. I thought this pitch was really good because you brought in the reality of our shifting demographics. So that part was really interesting. My question is more in line with JF in terms of really looking at the intersectionality in the population, the diverse population, and the potential impacts that could have in using some of these tools, especially given the fact that, as government, we have to uphold trust with Canadians. So one slight interpretation that could be waived on by somebody who's working on the private sector side, we wouldn't have that same reception as being that we're government of Canada. So just wondering about that and how you thought through that in putting the design of this together.
So I think, there's a potential risk. Let's just put it out there. I think from a usability perspective, and from what I understand of how we're moving towards the delivery of benefits digitally, we're looking at that interface with the client being a lot more personalized. And I think that if we could do that personalization coupled with the translation, I think that might mitigate some of the risk. So you're not putting a lot of content necessarily on a page that might have, some words that here or there are, not perfectly aligned to their linguistic preferences. And I do understand that there's dialects to be taken into consideration as well. But I also believe that the benefits outweigh the risks. The fact of the matter is that we need to deliver more benefits to Canadians, and there are a lot of Canadians who cannot self-serve digitally. There's a lot of rationale for us to be able to do this. I hesitate to say cost effectively because now I'm in government and that's not necessarily the driver. But at the end of the day, I do believe that this is really going to be about cultural inclusivity.
That's great. Let's wrap that there. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you, judges. Up next from the Government of Ontario is Shazma Ismail. Shazma, take it away.
Thanks, Meg. I want to tell you a story. A manager reached out to me after hearing I experienced a microaggression at work. She listened to my story, let me guide the process, and close the loop with me. She made me feel like I belong and taught me that leaders always advocate for people. I will never forget her or that lesson. I will propose a plan to create the conditions for belonging on a distributed team, one that can scale across governments. I've worked on these teams for 4 years, and I've been exploring better ways of working to build effective, humane, and pluralistic teams. For this pitch, I will tell you why it's important, some best practices I've learned, and how we can get there. Belonging matters because when people feel like they belong, it impacts their overall satisfaction, happiness, and health. Many studies also show these practices reduce turnover, result in fewer sick days, create a more productive workforce, and attract and retain skilled people. One study estimated that turnover due to workplace culture between 2014 and 2019 cost more than $200 billion. As we think about going back to the office and the future of work, how do we help people feel a sense of belonging on distributed teams? And we don't all have to figure this out in isolation. 4 examples of what has worked well for my team are understanding what our team needs, being flexible by default, being intentional on what we want to achieve and why, and being inclusive and collaborative. First, understanding what our team needs. This means we listen to understand, act on feedback, and iterate to improve. We care about and get to know people to build trust. For example, leaders show staff trust when we ask for their advice and give that advice to our boss. Staff feel mistrust when we approve questions before they're shared in an internal town hall meeting. Second, we are flexible by default. This means we respect different work hours and schedules through asynchronous communications practices. We build robust onboarding practices and set up virtual, social, and workspaces. For example, leaders show flexibility when staff can work from home on their own schedule. Third, we are intentional on what we want to achieve and why. This means we organize teams to deliver on shared goals and learn how to effectively run remote meetings. For example, when we communicate team goals, staff know how their work is impacted when priorities shift. Fourth, we are inclusive and collaborative. This means we consider lived experience with diverse perspectives. We focus on underrepresented groups and collaborate by working out loud. We share information and are transparent on processes and decisions. We call out unacceptable behavior and learn to recognize and prevent burnout. For example, when leaders don't stop people from committing microaggressions, it says that behavior is acceptable. So where are we now? I want people to feel belonging, especially on distributed teams. I have studied conditions that enabled belonging, tested them with my current team, and come up with these best practices. Now, I want to test it with multiple teams. Together, we will find conditions that work across all types of teams, and then we'll use it to create an open source product that can scale across governments. So judges, I need your help on 2 things. First, to find a couple of teams willing to test and learn with me, and second, to use your influence to help other leaders get on board. We need to get this right, especially since public servants in Ontario started going back to the office this week, and the rest of the country has started or will follow. It's a simple formula. Create belonging to enable diverse people to deliver. This creates a government that works better for people. And if you're still not convinced, I also worked with a 100% BIPOC team with diverse skills and a depth of experience in different domains. Our 5-person team delivered 80% of the 30-person team's mandate. And we had so much fun doing it. And I've never felt more belonging or valued on any team. People remember leaders who supported, cared for, and believed in them. How do you want to be remembered?
Thank you so much, Shazma. What a prescient topic and strong delivery. Okay, judges, come on in. Okay, let's start with Ima. Ima, what do you think?
Oh, I thought Shazma's pitch was extremely compelling, made me again want to talk to her and have a conversation with her about some of the practices and best practices. I thought it was excellent. My question is about intentionality, just how you thought through the ideas of really getting people to be more intentional in an approach, because we're all working in all these busy, very busy dynamic environments. So just wanted to hear more about that. It doesn't have to be here, but we can continue the conversation outside this forum too.
I love that. And always happy to continue this conversation with anyone, anywhere. Find me on Twitter even, and I'll talk to you about it. But I think that's a really great question around the intentionality. And I found most leaders, they're bombarded with things. So like 1,000 things a day coming at you, trackers to fill out, meetings coming at you. You don't have time to think about this stuff. And so I find leaders are often starting from scratch and aren't sure really where to start or what to do or where to look. And they're really open to suggestion. And so I think once they're aware of the behaviors or what the messages that behavior sends, they become more intentional about it. But it's often just that awareness piece that's missing.
Thank you.
Hillary, Shazma's from your neck of the woods in the Ontario government. What do you think of her pitch?
Indeed, she is. And I hope you know that you are singing my song. Thank you. Talk a lot about how do we get beyond, just diversity, inclusion. And what I try to roll off my tongue is always diversity, inclusion, and belonging. The first two, even if you move the needle on it and you don't work on the third one, you're going to lose all of that work. So thank you for this. Thank you for laying it out in a framework that makes sense. I'm super excited about it. I don't care what happens with the pitch today. We are going to meet. We're going to talk about it. So my question is, though, what do you think you need to find those first couple of teams to work with? Because I believe you're going to need a champion. You're going to need, an environment that's set up for success so you can prove it out. Obviously, your team is probably surrounded either with a champion or in a way that has allowed this to work itself out and to work. So beyond my team, because I think it would work well here, I'd love to have that framework in place, even though we think a lot about it. What do you think you need from either leadership or that fertile ground just to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want to shout out the ODS because I have been learning from leaders both things to do and things not to do. And I think the ODS has been a great example of all the things to do. But in terms of your question, what I need from leaders, I think so far the leaders I've had also believe in this and they are values driven. And so they get it right away. They know the importance of it. And so where I kind of want to go is I of course want to test it with the people who will support this and, make sure those principles work, but also talking to teams who aren't quite there yet, leaders who aren't quite there yet, and who are still at the beginning of their understanding and maybe even a little bit hesitant, because figuring out how to get them on board and how to get them working with these principles and unlearning their old ways of working, I think is a big part of making this successful and making it scale. So kind of folks on both ends of the spectrum who are really excited and who are a little skeptical.
A great way to start some user research. And quickly, JF, any thoughts?
Well, very quickly, you're bang on. I think belonging, trust, motivation are all key character traits and attributes of our future workforce. I think that it might even get more complicated because, we've learned how to work remote by default for health and safety reasons. And now we're moving towards flexibility by choice and exploring hybrid. And hybrid will be quite different than remote by default in many workplaces. And I think that what I like about your proposal is that it's not done. It's far from being done because it'll continue to evolve. And to me, it's an ongoing policy, culture, leadership conversation that must happen and must continue to happen because where we're going in the next year will be quite different than where we were. And we need to recognize that. And we need to recognize the impacts it has on our teams, the motivation level, and the direction of leadership development going forward.
All great points. Thank you so much, Shazma. Thanks, judges, for those insights. And we will move on. Up next, from the Treasury Board Secretariat, we have Joanna Finicue. Take it away, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Megan. And hi, everyone, and welcome to my TED Talk. I hope I have your attention now. It's not that kind of TED Talk. Today, I want to talk to you about something called transferable employee data to improve employee mobility in the federal public service. So the Government of Canada, as an employer, currently has 206 departments, agencies, crown corporations, and special operating agencies. That is a massive employer. If we zoom in a little bit on a typical employee experience, not unlike mine, let's take a look at what that looks like. So Jackie has worked for the Federal Public Service for 5 departments in her career so far. So to work in the Federal Public Service, Jackie needs to prove a bunch of things, such as her education, and language test results, security clearance, mandatory training. These are just a few examples. So when she starts working for Department A, Jackie goes down to her basement, digs up her boxes, takes out her transcript from school, and provides it to Department A as proof of education. While she's working in Department A, she undergoes some language testing from Department X, gets security clearance from Department Y, and takes some mandatory training from Department Z. Now, all of this information is stored in the database of Department A. 3 years later, Jackie decides to move from Department A to Department B. Now, to her surprise, the data about her, her credentials, proof of education and such, do not move from Department A to Department B, which leaves Jackie to try to figure out how to do that herself. So Jackie goes back to the basement, back to the box to find that proof of transcript, proof of education to provide to Department B, although she already gave this to Department A 3 years ago. So now all this information about Jackie is stored in the database of Department B. 2 years later, Jackie moves from Department B to Department C. Now you can guess what does not follow Jackie to Department C because it is still stuck in the databases of Department A and Department B. So Jackie has to provide her credentials again. 6 years later, you can see where this is going. Now, you times that 300,000 people in current departments, agencies, crown corporations, special operating agencies. And I'm sure JF can provide us some stats about how often people move in the Federal Public Service. And now their information is stuck in how many databases exactly? None of which really talk to each other. However, the data that each department collects or needs for an employee is really typically the same. We're talking about language testing, security clearance or proof of, mandatory training, proof of education. I like to call this transferable employee data, or TED. Now, what if we were to look at a slightly different future? One where we mainstream mobility in the Federal Public Service as an employer by adopting a set of verifiable credentials that are issued by the relevant institution, that are owned by the individual themselves, and that are accepted by every institution in the Government of Canada. Again, I'm going to repeat this. We want to mainstream mobility in the Government of Canada by adopting a set of verifiable credentials issued by the relevant institution, owned by the individual, and accepted by every institution. Why do this? Well, because one database to rule them all simply does not exist. And we already know that information does not really flow freely between departments or databases. And data about an individual really does belong to the individual. And also, we want to future-proof the Government of Canada as an employer. Why do this now? Well, because technology is ready. Distributed networks have shown some real promise. This is solving a real problem that we have that will save us money and time. So what now, or what's next? Well, I want to establish a coalition of the willing, the people who are ready and willing to do this. Leverage existing work. This is not necessarily groundbreaking, but we do need to mainstream it. We can use work that has already taken place. We can publish standards like open badges, but we do need to map out business and policy requirements to make this happen. I'm not just saying this myself. You can see a recent conversation on Twitter. I will let you read that. And yesterday, in an article that was published in Policy Options, you can see some comments from the former clerk of the Privy Council about this. So that is the question that I leave with you today. Again, I want to mainstream mobility and future-proof the Government of Canada as an employer through a set of verifiable credentials issued by the relevant institution, owned by the individual, and accepted by every institution. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Joanna, there's like a single tear of joy running down my cheek thinking about this future experience of changing departments as someone who's changing jobs right now. Thank you for that timely pitch. And judges, I'll invite you back to talk about, what's the feasibility of this solution? JF, what do you think?
Well, first, I think Iona was nice because the map of the current data, it would take much more boxes and lines to draw that up. And we actually have a drawing of it it's a messy space. And, I love the idea. I think it's absolutely essential that we get there. Data right now, it's not just about how it's duplicated in different systems, and never mind how difficult it is to reconcile. The truth of the matter is that we don't have a lot of data on the people that work in the public service, and a profile like that could be extended to skills, capacity, etc. All of the people management data that we have in the public service is anchored in positions, occupational groups, and demographics who occupy that position, but not a lot about the people, the skills they have, and the skills we need. So I think the concept that you're putting forward, Iona, is bang on. I think a central employee profile is key. And I love the pitch. I like the idea, and I think it's very timely and almost necessary.
Thank you. Hillary, is this a problem in the Ontario government? Could you see this happening for you folks?
I think it's different in terms of just the size of the government and how folks move around the system here. But what I see this very related to in general is digital identity work that's happening at all levels of government at the moment. And that idea of credentials and micro credentials, whether it's a transcript, like you said, or a diploma or something like that, it is certainly high time that we get to a place where I can be easily in control of those and share them with whom I need to. So bang on in terms of the vision, I guess, in terms of how you think you would get started. And I'm not familiar, but you did mention that there already are credentials. So do you feel like there's the need for a credentials strategy, for lack of a better term, or is it really more about, the data transit and the environment of getting those into a system or into a wallet, et cetera, or the user could be in control?
I'm so sorry to tell you that it's all of it. It really is all of it. It's the foundation of digital identity. It's exactly where we need to go, whether we leverage what Orgbook has done in British Columbia, what Saskatchewan has done. So this is my rallying cry, really, that we need to do this. What I see as a first step is really go bold with a prototype here, because if we go bold with 200, 300,000 people, one transaction, and we make sure that everything's in place to make that happen, then we can just keep going and expand it, and then see what we can do for really the rest of Canadians. This doesn't stop here.
Okay, and last, Emma, your thoughts?
No, thanks, Joanna. I thought this was really good. I really liked your approach. I love the horizontality in your thinking. My question is more around how we seem to impose some of the barriers on ourselves by the way we design our practices, our procedures around HR. So I'm just wondering how you thought through that. Like, we can have the tools, but then it goes back to how we really apply it and really put some of these processes and practices in place. So that was more what I was thinking.
100%. And I mean, JF is right there in the corner, so I can just point to him and say, I'll be knocking on his door and working with folks. That's it. I think it's high time to really start talking about these. I think if we have a common outcome and objective, we can start taking down those barriers. And really, what are we trying to achieve here? We're really trying to future-proof and help mobility. So what processes can we pull down and maybe agree to put aside, because we're moving on to modern government, new outcomes? What can we do next? It's collaboration, co-creation is really where I'm going with this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joanna, and thank you, judges. I can't believe it, because all these pitches have been so much fun to listen to, but we're actually on our last pitch. And for our last pitch, we have Sean Boots from the Canadian Digital Service at the Treasury Board. Sean, the stage is yours.
Cool. Thanks so much, everyone. My name is Sean. You might know me from Twitter. I work for a digital services team in the Canadian federal government. I've basically dedicated my career to helping public servants get the tools and equipment they need to be really, really great at what they do. I want public servants to have just as good of tools as people who work at Shopify or Google, no matter where they work in government. Today, I'm going to pitch ways of solving the missing middle in software procurement. This is a problem that teams like mine run into on a regular basis. First off, what does missing middle mean? In the urban planning world, people use it to describe how neighborhoods are designed and built. In North America, most neighborhood housing is either single-family detached homes, sort of your stereotypical suburb, or in large cities, it's super giant condo skyscrapers. You've got small, and you've got huge, and you don't have anything in between. In other parts of the world, think of Paris, for example, a lot of neighborhoods are 5 or 6 story housing blocks. They're dense enough to support a vibrant community. You've got little restaurants and cafes everywhere. You can easily walk around. It makes parks and public transit work really well. So that's the metaphor, the happy medium of urban design, and how, classic, in North America, we don't have enough of it. What does that look like for software procurement? Let's start with what we're trying to accomplish. In government, we lose talented people all the time because our default tools are so bad. If you want to do good work, you need good tools. In today's day and age, especially when we're all working online from home, a lot of that involves software as a service tools that are online subscription services. These are things like Slack, GitHub, Trello, or Figma that you access through a web browser and that let you collaborate in cool ways with other colleagues. Here's the problem. If your tool is inexpensive and your team is small, amazing. You can put the subscription cost on a departmental credit card and call it a day. And if your tool is really, really expensive, like several $1,000,000, and sold by one of the really large IT vendors, no problem. There are contracting vehicles in place from Shared Services Canada that you can get it from. That's our suburban house and our giant skyscraper, respectively. What's missing? Here's your situation. You've got a team of 150 people. There's an online tool that everyone in the tech industry uses. It costs about $30 per person per month. That means in a year, you're going to spend about $60,000 on this tool. How do you do that? You literally can't. That's the missing middle. Here's the barriers. In federal procurement rules, the government contracts regulations, I can sole source something if it's less than 40K after taxes. My 60K purchase is too big. Even if it was just below, I'd run into the same problem next year since the 40K limit is over apparently all time. I could do a standalone competitive procurement, but it would take between 6 months and 2 years to happen. The company making the tool that the team actually wants to use might not even bid. The winner of the RFP will be whoever writes the most convincing bid, not who makes the best tool. And I have to know, possibly years ahead of time, how many licenses I might need because if my team grows, I'm out of luck anyways. Not to mention, my procurement and legal folks will say, you need to set up custom contract terms with the vendor to protect the crown. And the vendor will say, and this is a true story, we won't bother negotiating custom terms for anything less than 250K USD. It's not worth the cost of their lawyers otherwise. So I'm trying to spend 60K and I can't. If I was trying to spend $5 million from a large cloud vendor, there's a bunch of ways I could do that. And if the tool that I wanted had authorized resellers who competed in air quotes, to be on a supply arrangement list, that would work too. But the tool I want to use isn't on there, so I'm hooped. What do you do instead? You stop using the tool that everyone loves, and all of your best people quit and go work for Shopify. Not great. What should change? Here's my pitch, or at least here's a few possibilities. Possibility 1. Change the 40K sole source limit in the government contract regulations to be 40K per year for subscription services rather than 40K indefinitely. Possibility 2. Bump that sole source limit way up to 100K, again, per year to make more room for medium-sized teams to sole source online tools. Possibility 3. Add exceptions wherever you need to so that if vendors only offer products via credit card, you can still go for it. For all these companies, 99% of their customers are not in government. If we can't buy their stuff, that's our problem, not theirs. Governments need to get used to being small, unimportant customers and to paying for things on a credit card like everyone else does. Plus, I don't have one online tool to procure. I have 7 that are going to go over the sole source limit. And in a year, the best-in-class tool for a given use case will change. My team will want to use the new one instead of the old one from a different company. There's no way that our existing procurement processes can keep up. So, call up your procurement policy friends, see if we can make that happen before I lose all my good people. Procurement, it's the best, and also the worst. Thanks for having me here.
And doesn't that resonate? The best and the worst. Procurement, one of the unsung heroes of digital government. Thank you, Sean. And judges, we're going to bring you back for some comments on Sean's proposal. We will kick off with Ima. Ima, what did you think about Sean's procurement dilemmas?
I think it was very interesting in the way you tied the procurement issue to retention. I thought that was amazing the way you did that. You did it very well. I like the way you flagged the risk, the issues around how we kind of really talk about risk when we're looking at buying or procuring tools. The question I had, though, is how do you balance that? So how did you think through mitigating the risk? Because you're right, there's a lot of anticipation and fear. over being sued. So as public service, how do we think through that?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. That's a really good question. I think there's two parts of it, kind of thinking to like Louis Eisen's presentation yesterday about sort of what's the intent behind procurement policies. And I think there's two that really come out. One is sort of the fairness of, you know, governments not wanting to sort of like arbitrarily pick a winner and say like, yes, we're just going to pick this tool because, you know, my cousin's friend made it. That's something we definitely want to avoid. I think the other thing that a lot of procurement processes try to avoid is, you know, making sure we have enough due diligence before setting up like an 8-year contract or like a really big project where you're really counting on that vendor to, you know, actually deliver the thing that they're promising to deliver. What's really nice with a lot of these online tools is that those risks don't really apply because it's a lot easier to just quickly try it out. It's sort of, you know, like the undo button that Mark Schwartz, one of the speakers this morning, said. You can try an online tool for a month. Sometimes you can try them for free. Sometimes it might be like 20 bucks, no problem. And if it works, amazing. And if it doesn't work, no problem too. And that lets you sort of jump into something and also back out again without saying, yes, we're going to buy 8 years worth of Trello. Instead, you're just saying we're going to buy 3 months. And if the team likes it and if it helps them be more productive, rock on. And if it doesn't, then we can switch to a different tool afterwards. So I think part of it is sort of the processes are designed for those really big projects. And the question is, how do we fit them to sort of the medium-sized situation that we're in? So that's a super good question.
JF, what do you think about Sean's proposal?
Well, I definitely like the problematic. I think you've nailed it. I think that big procurement seems sometimes easier to do than procurement that's just above that limit. You know, I don't want to do procurement policy here on Forward 50, but raising a limit has a lot of impacts because whatever limit you're going to raise it to, every supplier will price to that number almost automatically. But, you know, I do think what you're raising requires thought. I'm not sure if the solution is that simple, but what you're raising is true, and it ends up costing more money because we're trying to navigate a space where we're trying to buy useful things at the price point or at the service point that are just very difficult to procure, and that has to be solved. So you're raising the right questions, you're raising the right issues. I'm not quite sure what the right solution is, but it's definitely worth the conversation. Absolutely.
Hillary, thoughts on some more agile procurement?
Well, I was giggling as I came on screen. Thank you for using my friend Sasha's tweet. It's inevitably true. Digital government nerds always come around to talking about procurement. So my question is mostly because I love this idea. Teams like mine would absolutely benefit from it. So I want to push you just to tell me what other teams would benefit from this. Other teams that are sort of different from CDS or ODS.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's really easy to think of the tools that are kind of specific to teams like ours, tools for designers, tools for software engineers. I think there's a lot out there for just sort of general team collaboration where tools can, you know, learn to like manage their works and like their work and projects with similar tools. Data scientists, I think, run into a lot of similar issues in government where they have really specialized data analysis tools that might only be available in the same way. I think that's a really important point, that sometimes it's easy to think like, we need these tools for the digital teams, we need these tools for like the sort of, you know, extra hardcore whoever. It's like these tools are really useful for every public servant. And you don't want to create sort of this like 2-tier system where like these teams get the cool tools and everyone else has the boring tools. My goal would be for everyone to be able to get the really awesome ones. So yeah, appreciate that for sure.
I love that. There's a possibility public servants aren't using the cool tools just because they don't have access to them and haven't figured out a way to get around their firewall. Thank you, judges, and thank you, Sean, so much for our last pitch of Forward 50. And I am going to actually ask the judges to come on back because we're doing something a little bit fun here when it comes to open government. It's actually time to deliberate publicly on these pitches. Now, we're taking OpenGov really seriously here. And one of the things is that we want to hear how executives like yourselves think about these policy pitches and think about their implementation. So we're going to consider the merits and challenges of each for about 15 minutes and shed light on how we can create more effective actions in digital government. And then you will go into some private deliberation to choose our final winner. So, you know, we're trying this all for the first time. It might be a little awkward. We're going to make it work. But let's think back a little to about an hour ago to our first big pitch by Stephanie on banishing giant government projects. What do you guys think?
Easier said than done, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Like I said, I believe 100% in trying to get there, and we have been trying to get there. Would love to enable, a team around this in any jurisdiction, especially at the federal level, to kind of think through it. We got a little bit into it in the Q&A. I felt like some of that was missing in the pitch in terms of a little bit more meat around the how, because it is difficult. I think it's the big vision is great. Need to tease out what it really means to be able to have the ability to put some gates in, to be able to work inside the machinery at various different levels and places. So
Jeff, do you think this is something that's on the table at TBS? Is this something that leaders would be interested in taking on?
So you're putting a lot of work, a lot of weight when you say I'm representing TBS, but I'll give it a shot. I would just say that I felt the pitch has a lot of value as something that drives principles going forward more than policy. I think the principle-based approach of starting small and trying to scale is the right principle. Like Hillary said, I think there are some things where the ship has sailed, and to use words like ban major transformation projects is bold, but may not be doable or realistic in the short term. So I think principles going forward are almost as important as rules. And that's how we see, moving forward, permissive principles, coherence and strategic way forward, bang on. Policy, not sure yet.
Okay. Ima, any thoughts on that? I love the spiciness of banning. I just thought that was very spicy.
No, I thought it was a very interesting pitch because, we're going through some major transformation in government. And I think there's an opportunity for us to have a conversation about this. But I'm with Hillary on this in terms of actually putting this into practice. It will require a lot of review of the current machinery. So we need some time to think through this one. But yeah. I think that she's onto something here. I think Stephanie's onto something. And we shouldn't lose it. That's how I feel about this one.
Awesome. Okay, so let's think about CIDRA's service register, about services being down, publishing that data across the government. You guys really thought there were some challenges around that standardization, but, is there some opportunities to kind of start small on this one and really pilot it at Service Canada, Ima? What do you think?
No, yeah, I think definitely an opportunity for us to pilot this. Again, I think it needs more thinking through to really the practical execution, but she's onto something here too.
Hillary, would you see something like that working for Ontario?
I think honestly it would work anywhere. It's about how do you get started and how do you start small and what do you decide to, again, ask those services to be reporting, et cetera. Service Canada is probably a good option. I know Service Ontario has some of this in the back end, but thinking about how to surface that, how to make some of it public, I think would be the first step. And maybe even leveraging some sort of open source tool or software as a service that you could figure out how to feed in as a first step. Yeah, a lot of merit there. And I really appreciate the examples that she gave. And she put a ton of thought into the kinds of metrics that people would care about and that we want to think about. Appreciated that a lot.
I kind of think about how we could, make it a standard to set up the second that you start a new service. I'm thinking about her team at Service Canada, also used to be my team. It's one of those ones we're building new services. Maybe we just build it into the back end. Do you think this is a feasible proposition, JF?
Well, I think it is. I think I'm kind of aligned and pushing this in Ima's corner in a sense that this is far from the impact of what I actually do for a living. So, but I see the merit, like anything that actually puts data in the open that clarifies, a path for either, a citizen, a client, and even people who work within it definitely has value. But this one here, I'll be brutally honest, it didn't resonate with me as much because it's far away from what I do on a daily basis. So I'm coming at it pretty cold.
Okay, well, this next one is one that is more in your wheelhouse on people. Were you on board with Ev's onboarding plan?
Yeah, well, absolutely in principle. I think the onboarding, it touches the pitch on belonging. It's anchored in the new ways of working. There will be more movement, hopefully less anchored attachment to structure. which means the open sourced approach and crowdsourced approach to sharing that information is more relevant than ever. I do see challenges and mention content curation, keeping up to date, and keeping momentum behind things like that. In a previous job, our world in learning was to consolidate and reduce duplication. And I can tell you that that's an uphill daily battle in an organization where every deputy head is accountable for the people management in their organizations. And that distributed accountability model drives the silos. So it's always an uphill battle to actually conquer that horizontal goal. This one here, though, I think has legs because of the timing and because of where we're going.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some challenges about, enterprise stuff. I always worry about enterprise. I'm kind of pro decentralization, but at the same time, that repetition could be leveraged. Emma or Hillary, did you have thoughts on it?
I'm with JF on this one. I like the horizontal approach that she pitched, but I was also worried about the siloed approach we take within departments. Again, we impose the obstacles on ourselves, by being siloed and the way we operate. So putting this into operation, I was thinking it'll take work, it'll take a mindset shift, but there are opportunities to leverage a lot of what F pitched here.
I think so. And my team onboarded 80 people this year, and the amount of action that took was outrageous. You want to make sure it's consistent, right? Hillary, did you have any thoughts on the feasibility of this kind of thing? Would it be something we could do cross-jurisdictionally?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of cross-jurisdictionally, perhaps, I'm sure there are similarities to onboarding into government. But I do think, I hear enterprise versus decentralized, but so much of this could be, and again, you don't want however many different, in Ontario, there's 28 different ministries. You don't want 30 different versions of that, plus the divisions each doing their own thing, and then each program doing their own thing. What I liked about this is I do believe it's something you could just start. There's a simplicity to it, and it could have enormous impact. And then you'd have to go about the hard work of figuring out how to sustain it. But I do think, based on what she mentioned about CDS, what she mentioned about some other pockets that are already experimenting with this, it does seem something that's simple, feasible, and you could get started and cut bait if you need to in the future.
Yeah, I totally love that it came out of the Federal Youth Network and some need that they saw, and they're already starting in a decentralized way, which is super cool. Okay, so then we got really technical with Germain talking about performance measurement. This definitely struck a chord with a few of you. Thoughts on feasibility? Is this where we need to go, Emma, do you think, in terms of making sure departments are staying true to these results that they're being held to?
So with Germain's pitch, I just felt we need more of a discussion. Like we needed to talk through his idea a bit more. It's at the surface, it looks really good conceptually, but I think there's more to dig in there and really understand how we want to really measure outcomes within the government of Canada and if it really makes sense. So I left that discussion just feeling like we needed more time together to talk. So that was kind of how I left it.
Yeah, this is definitely a complex one. Do you think that this is more time needed on this?
Oh, absolutely. And we need to always understand the indirect consequences of having a percentage at the end of the year and how that can be misinterpreted sometimes. So I'm all for the results. I think the performance measurement system now with the PIPs and everything else that we have to drive there is quite cumbersome as we speak. And I think, Emma, you had mentioned, what I mentioned is context and qualitative information still matters. And of course, the answer was great, which is when you course correct, create a new metrics and whatnot. But we have issues having the data follow the structure as it is now. The data is not that agile, or maybe it is in some areas and not in others. So the merit of it's right. Transparency and results have to be the drivers of our business. Getting to a final number like that, I think needs to be thought through because it could have perverse effect in the reality in terms of the results conversation.
Yeah, we have to be so careful about the effects of measuring, right? You value what you measure there. Hillary, any additional thoughts on that?
I think just to say that this is probably something that is absolutely needed. And in the world, thinking about transparency, open government, et cetera, such a great idea and great proposal. And then I will say, I'm sure it scares the heck out of folks, both, executives like myself that are, have to execute on the mandate letters, and my counterparts on the political side. It's something that I think would, to Ema's point, would take a conversation to really get there, which is why I appreciated, the Q&A there, where, he said, like, how do we get started? Well, let's focus on those things that we know everybody's trying to act on. So whether it's truth, reconciliation, or other things, what are those big boulders that we're all pushing together? I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea. So Andrea came to us with a really simple idea, complex implementation on linguistic diversity. What do you think the potential to implement this in new services we're developing would be? Ema, thoughts on that?
My thinking is we need more user testing. We need to work through that a bit more, especially given the recent indications around trust of public service and data and delivery and all that. So I think we need to think through it more in terms of potential downstream impacts it could have. So I would say more user research is needed. But the idea sounds great. The concept is great. I really liked the thinking around the future population shifting demo. I liked all that. But we need more work, just given the fact that we really need to hone in on trust for the public.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, one of the things that resonated with me is that we've just started doing content design separately in French and English to make sure we're getting the right words in our two official languages. How do we evolve and make sure we hold that quality still, but then also provide access? You're kind of measuring those two things against each other. Hillary, what crossed your mind with this?
Pitch was excellent. And I loved sort of starting with that question to keep in mind throughout the whole thing around, can linguistic diversity be the lever to accelerate digital transformation? And at the end of her pitch, my answer to that would be yes. Like, I do see where she's coming from. I think great setup, nice inclusion of stats. Putting a face on it was also, I thought, a really good part of her pitch. I think I would go back to, some of the Q&A, comparing what we're trying to do. And I think JF actually teased this out better than my question did. I was stumbling a little bit, but, comparing the government to IBM or Shopify, it doesn't really capture what we have to do, what we have to be responsible for, what we have to be accountable for. But she did push back, and she constantly kind of said, but I think the benefits outweigh the risks. So I think to get started on something like that, what I think would help would actually be not focusing on the tool or the how-to, because again, push of a button, we can do it. What's our content prioritization path? Because I think, again, like, let's identify, again, to Jeff's comment about an earlier one, principles. What types of content could we do that? Yeah, there's very little risk here. Let's push the button. Let's make it available in 100 languages and start building trust that way. But then understand where things are a little bit more complex or more serious or might need some human intervention.
I think there's some opportunity to leverage. The Canada Revenue Agency already publishes in 10 or 12 different languages for their tax time stuff. We have some people doing this. How have they worked on it, and could we leverage what they've done? Jeff, do you have any other ideas on it?
Well, very quickly, I was just going to say that, some departments, CRA, and I believe even the SDC in certain instances do publish in multi-languages. So I think the concept isn't new. The standardization could be interesting. I just like the fact that one of the pitches was really anchored in the diversity of Canada and to think digital transformation through an inclusive lens. So I like the pitch for those reasons. I'm sure there are a lot of, we can't leave it to machines. AI is good. And I think translations have gone a long way, at least since the last 10 years for sure. And it's one of the areas that's accelerating the most. But nuances are extremely important when we get to delivering programs and services. So getting that right will create, some human intervention there for sure. But really happy to see a pitch that's anchored in an inclusive, driven objective. So great.
And then Shazma brought us the internal diversity, how we would really create belonging and inclusivity on our virtual distributed teams. I think this touched everyone as saying, this is a really good idea and something that's so needed where we're at right now. Ema, what do you think about the feasibility of starting working on this idea?
Yeah, I really liked Shazma's pitch. I was almost like, can we talk and can we start working on this in my team and look for ways we can scale this? So no, I thought it was really good. It was very practical. She talked about intentionality, which I think is huge when it comes to inclusion and really creating a sense of belonging. I liked her approach to talking about this as creating the conditions, for belonging. I really emphasize this enough. I really enjoyed how she talked about it. And I think it's something that we can actually take. I mean, all of us here on this panel, we can actually take that and practically start, applying some of these in our teams and in our areas of work. So again, it was an excellent pitch. Really enjoyed that one.
I do feel like she just equipped me to start my new job on Monday and bring that right to my team. Hillary, I feel like you're going to be calling Shazma in the Ontario government.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to continue this conversation, and I agree with Ima. I think if this were a pitch for some sort of funding or something like that, I mean, the next step would be like flesh out this framework, give us the tools, give us that quick handbook, that whatever it is, if you're using Slack, what are the kind of tools that you use to build out this kind of framework? So, I think her basic 4-point framework is something that everybody could take away today and start working on. So this was great.
Totally. I'm going to actually move to our next just to keep our topics going and getting through our deliberation. We had Joanna next bring us the TED, the employee credentials that would help us move in a more agile way across the federal government. JF, what did you think about implementing this and kind of continuing on the work to make this happen for the public service?
Well, I mean, what I liked about this pitch is that it got me thinking bigger and more, even more benefits than what I actually put on the table. I think that we need to move that way. There are 30 plus systems that guide HR data in the federal public service, and how they interact with other data sources is quite complicated. And there is a lot of duplication in each one of those. There's data that has to be kept separately because of the sensitivity of it. But there's a lot more data than we think that could be portable and doesn't create risk. And I think that, taking the concept and really personalizing and humanizing the data within the public service to understand the skills we have as we move forward and how we can move people more quickly to surge management priorities. These are all things we learned during the pandemic, and something like this would enable better movement and a better understanding of our workforce and simplify the employee experience. So I guess I liked it.
Ima, in the data world, do you think this is feasible to happen? There's a lot of digital identity work going on at your department. What do you think?
No, I think it's feasible. My concern hinged basically on how we public servants tend to create all these processes and practices that handcuff us. So we have the technology, we have the concepts, but we don't use them because we have all these ways we work in silos. So I was more thinking through that, like, how do we finally, conquer this issue around the silos, the unnecessary bureaucratic processes that we impose on ourselves. And working through that, I think, would be important for us to really enable some of this to be successful. So there's leadership needed there from all of us on this panel, including myself, to see how we can eliminate some of those processes, to make things easier.
Agreed entirely. There's a lot more transformation to do than just credentials. Okay, lastly, we had Sean's pitch on procurement's missing middle. What do we think, Hillary, on feasibility to change something like this? I know it's a little scary to do procurement policy in public, but...
Yeah, well, I really, first of all, appreciated Sean's pitch. I love framing it as the missing middle. I think that was a really great way to draw attention to the problem. We joke all the time, it's easier to spend $10 million than it is to spend 10,000. So I think he framed the problem well, which I really, really appreciated. I loved that, he responded well to my question in terms of course, this is going to benefit a team like mine, but what's the value? What is the impact across the public service? And I do believe it's there. I will agree with JF's comments during the pitch that I'm not sure that the solution that he's pitched is exactly probably what you'd want to do for all the reasons that JF mentioned. But he put some things on the table. He got us talking, he got us thinking, and that's what this is meant to do.
Exactly. I think the same. JF?
Well, I totally agree. It's a problem. It's been a problem for... Well, I've been in the public service 26 years now. I actually got the gift for the 25th year anniversary the other day that made me feel really, really older than I think I am. Anyways, all that to say that he's identified the problem, the seed is planted, and I think we need to collectively think through what the solution is there.
Okay, so judges, I'm banishing you off the stage to go into your private room to deliberate on your final choice. And I'm inviting Alistair back on stage with me, and we're going to look at what that audience participation brought us. Alistair, Data Man, what do you got for us?
Well, I've been crunching some numbers behind the scenes. Alex, if you want to bring this up, this is the chart we have. And this is comparing how the pitches did across the 5 axes that the audience gave us feedback on. It was great. We got 60 to 80 votes per speaker, which was kind of nice. And so some of these were interesting. One of the things I found, like, I'm a data nerd. So for me, Germain's was great. I was like totally in. This is absolutely what we demand for trust and accountability. But it's also clear that the judges are like, wow, that's hard. And our audience, which is aware of just how hard it is to link this, I felt bad for Germain because I really thought that's what it takes to make the data true.
Well, I think it's a hard one also because of the impact is very high level. We had a lot of very user-centric, whether those users were of the public or public servants who, you know, you could tell really fast would be impacted, but high-level data for public accountability impact is it's not as personal to people.
Yeah, and it didn't have the bumper sticker feel of maybe like a Sean Boots kind of thing where he's like, you know, missing middle. It's a nice, I think having those little sound bites. What were your thoughts on which one would have the most impact across these things?
You know, I was thinking a lot about Andrea's pitch because I think it was that really personal feel, as well as Sidra told such a great story about her personal experiences. We've all been there, we've lived through it, and same with Andrea's. It had that really user focus. So I think it might come from a little bit of the perspective of our audiences.
Yeah,
you know, are you a policy nerd? Are you a service designer? Kind of where you think about impact, right?
Does
But
this make your job easier as a public servant? Does this make your service better for the constituents?
And I mean, I think about Joanna's digital wallet. I'm going through a job change. That sounds life-changing for public servants, you know? So it's really, I think, a lot about who your audience is and how you think about impact, really.
And I think it's important to remember that stuff's all linked because obviously if public servants enjoy their jobs better and don't have to deal with minutia. I was talking to someone the other day. In Quebec, we have mandatory snow tire changes, right? That's twice a year for 4 hours a day. You got to go get your tires changed. That is a quarter of Quebec's population doesn't work 1 day a year because we have to get our winter tires changed. And obviously we need them changed. But, you know, if you're just looking at it from an economics GDP thing, that's like a quarter of a year of unproductive work that one policy had an impact on society. And so we seldom step back and look at the big cost of these things. And I think that's where the impact gets really interesting.
Totally.
Let me bring up simplicity. Again, Germain's stuff seemed pretty complex, perhaps because it was really keeping score of all the other things. Which one struck you as the most simple and like good to go?
I thought that Sidra's was really quite simple in terms of that's something we could actually implement and it'd be part of planning new services. You know, that's something we already have that tells you what all the services are in the Government of Canada that Treasury Board runs. It wouldn't be super hard to stand up the same for kind of downtime. I think it would be hard to do the omni-channel thing, but if we started small and piloted, I thought that would be really simple. And then with Andrea's, we already have some of the linguistic duality stuff starting. We obviously have bilingual, but we've kind of got it already in some departments. So it'd be easy to study and start, you know, doing some more, really bringing together a community of practice who've already started on those multilingual services. It would be kind of really good one to work with provinces, other jurisdictions on too. So those seemed kind of quite straightforward. And then Shazma's, though, creating and managing teams, as many of us know, is one of the hardest things. Starting to put principles in place, getting a playbook together and distributing across, you know, this whole conference, their collective teams. I think you could do a lot with that really easily to start.
Yeah, every year. I mean, I'm getting messages from people. Someone at TBS was like, well, I didn't know about this, so I'm sharing my wife's ESDC pass to attend. And like, okay, we're not talking to one another. Coming out of this list, my first job in software development was actually product localization into foreign languages. It is infinitely easier to make a new language once your product's already bilingual than it is to make a first language, right? Now, that's not always true when you're dealing with, you know, Arabic languages that go right to left or with ideographic languages, but you're already so much further ahead that to add German, once we have French and English, is trivial. Whereas if you only have English, that's a whole bunch of work. So we already have so much of the infrastructure for 2-language services that we have a leg up there.
I think that could also lead us a lot on improving our representation of languages in the Government of Canada already. We already have so many people who speak so many languages who aren't getting to use them in their jobs. And you know, there's some opportunities to say that we really are embracing a multicultural public service as well.
And we're running the machine language translation in the background. It's not perfect, but editing an already translated thing to make it perfect is already so much easier. I wanted to give a shout out to Sean's. I'm a person who listens to a lot of startup pitches. He had the simplest answer when it comes to the simplicity, which was make it 10,000 a year.
Yeah.
I was just like, that's a brushstroke, and it can't get out of control because you can watch the amount. And if you see it being abused with vendors who are like, our stuff is $9,999 a year, you can start to push back on that. But I thought, here's one change that has a huge impact, which is make it 10 grand a year, not 10 grand.
Yeah, it's a couple words in a policy. It's a heck of a lot of legal work, which I think all of us know. But at the same time, could we run some pilots?
Well,
Could
and I
we
think
just
it would
start that?
also allow startups to sell to government much more effectively than they have in the past, because we had a whole industry innovations panel on the challenges of breaking into government when you're an early stage company.
They did it in the UK and it was super successful. And then it actually stimulated the economy a ton because small businesses were able to sell to government more. They
Right.
particularly did it around selling physical computers and buying from small local companies. So, I think that's kind of the start of that idea. And it's something that would really benefit Canada in a lot of different ways.
Right. Let's talk about originality. Which one did you think was most original?
I would actually, I'm not sure on originality, because I think a lot of these are really good ideas that we talk about a lot, but these were people bringing them together and saying, hey, it's time to get this done. I think I would go with the crowd on this, on Joanna's being the digital wallet. Is something that's, I'd say, actually probably the least talked about right now in the digital government world. It might be because it's a little unsexy to talk about the job environment of public servants, though we're doing it a lot in the news right now, and kind of say, would this actually really help improve digital government? Well, yeah, retention of employees is huge. And we're bleeding right now. Actually, we're going to see a lot of them change their jobs in the next little while. So I think it could be an amazing one. And then really get our data on our public service, improve that recruitment and retention. So, it's a bit self-serving, but if we don't create a good environment of work here, we're not going to be able to do the work we need to do on digital government.
I think if she made it NFTs for credentialing, then immediately. But that's actually not entirely untrue. The idea of a decentralized credential that you can follow around. And one of the things I saw a few years ago, which was brilliant, SAP had this thing where if you were an SAP consultant and you answered a few questions well on behalf of others, then they would invite you to the silver level support on LinkedIn. So now you're part of the silver support group. And then recruiters would see your badge and go, this person, because SAP has said this person is helpful in our forums, a recruiter would go, I'm going to pay you more to work as an SAP consultant. So they kind of used LinkedIn as a credentialing system, which was kind of cool because it was like an added bonus. If I answer enough questions, I'll probably get a salary raise the next time someone hires me.
Well, we have tons of identity systems already in the government.
Right.
Like the amount of logins I have, and the Treasury Board put up a great one a few years ago called GC Pay. You don't hear a lot of great things necessarily about the pay system, lots of challenges, but they put an amazing interface that pulls on a few APIs and really visualizes your pay data really well, which helps people deal with the ups and downs that sometimes happen because of the Phoenix system. If they could use that already with some of these things, use it for your digital credentials, anything is better than the folder on the desktop of my computer called government ID stuff, So some of these have to be better, and it has to be better than finding your diploma every couple of years.
For sure. Urgency. Which one do you think is like a burning need here?
I felt Sean's was really urgent, just in terms of right now in the moment of the pandemic, we have had a ton of trouble getting the right software to help our teams work really, really well. So that was really tough. I also felt that with EVS, the onboarding repository. Yeah, onboarding remotely has been really tough. The time that my team spent on this year is crazy. I love that they are scaling. I love the idea that they're scaling kind of this need that's been happening and something that CDS already started. It's great. So I think these things that actually face public servants are some of the most urgent things because the government has spent so much time on users during the pandemic, on people who've had needs. Like a lot of public servants have made an enormous amount of sacrifices. So for us to retain the talented public servants who have been providing, I think spending a little time on public servants' needs would be really, really good.
So last thing was the pitch. I should start by saying everybody here pitched awesome. We didn't have slides. Shazma didn't have slides, right? May have hurt her a little in the total here. I think people liked the slides, but it seemed pretty good.
She told a compelling story.
Yeah, it was great. I did think the pitches were all pretty good. Certainly never underestimate the value of a good line, right? Like Sean said, the missing middle and it's 10K a year. Like it really having boiled down. And I think coming up with those simple taglines of huge consequences is big. But I was impressed by a lot of them. Like it does seem to me that we do enough cross-pollination like this, that there's so many good ideas out there, and we need a way to surface these things on a regular basis.
Yeah, this was, I think, really, I was blown away by the quality of the pitches. I had, of course, read the descriptions, but seeing them presented was amazing. I'm also really impressed. We had several new public servants, mentioned Eve, Germain, Andrea, and Sidra, all fairly new public servants who are saying, I want to get my ideas out there. I want to pitch to this large group of my peers, colleagues, and soon to be friends. And I'm really, really blown away by that they all wanted to do that and all put in the time to do this. Thank you all very much for doing that, because it's not an easy thing to do.
It takes a lot of guts. And I did think, I've talked to people as I've been putting together this conference. I've had many friends in the private sector who are like, I thought doing some time in public service, or I thought for running for office. They have no idea how to start, no idea what it would be like. And they just feel like they'd be, they know the private sector, their industry, they know a SaaS business, and they could come into government, but they're like, I don't even know how I would find out what that would be like. I don't think the public understands when a new minister comes into a cabinet position, they get a briefing, but, it's kind of assumed that you've worked your way up through local politics or something. If we're going to try and attract technologists who are considering a career change and work remotely for half the salary and still have the same quality of life and feel good about themselves instead of just being paid to make people click things more, then I think we need to make sure that they're able to make that transition. I mean, it's almost like career counseling or dealing with someone's PTSD from the private sector. And I don't see an onboarding ramp for bringing on private sector talent who wants to change their life and devote themselves to the call of public service for a while.
And luckily, we're seeing some more of that. I mean, the Canadian Digital Service has been really focused on the Talent Cloud project at TBS. My team at ESTC with Pia Andrews, we brought in a lot of people from outside of the public service, but it's also hard to do, and that's what CDS has definitely shown in the last couple of years. It's hard to bring people in from outside. And I think alongside these pitches, talking about how we can better serve public servants in their experience of working for government, there needs to be a lot of pitches next year on how we can improve the whole process of onboarding, of recruiting, retaining, and creating, a much friendlier system in terms of bringing people in. So that's something I really look forward to hearing more about in future versions of Ford 50 and hopefully future versions of the G Factor contest.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen. Alex, you can hide my screen while I get this going. It's amazing how much technology we have here.
This is for audience choice, folks. So go on and select your winner. We're on. Yes, perfect. Okay. Good. Vote for your audience choice. And at this moment, are you ready to invite the judges back?
Judges can come on back in.
Come on. Alex, can you send them back in? And we're going to get ready to announce the winner. Okay, judges, who will be presenting our final winner?
That's interesting. We didn't actually talk about it. We didn't do that. So, Ima, do you want to announce the first of two winners?
We went back and forth, because like you said, Megan, they were all amazing. And we decided we'll go with two winners because we needed that was external focus and one was internally focused. That means one that really spoke to the need of Canadians, really improving services, improving policies, and then one with the internal government of Canada operations. So the winner for the external best pitch we received was number 2, Sidra.
Congratulations, Sidra. That's awesome.
And the reason we went with you, Sidra, is you spoke very eloquently to this client-centric view and the need to really better serve Canadians. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much. What an honor. Much appreciated.
Okay, we'll be excited to see what you can do in the next year with JF, Ima, and Hillary behind you on these ideas. And take us to the internal to the Government of Canada winner.
Yeah, so as Ima mentioned, they were all good, and I think they all have value, and they should all exercise influence in our collective thinking. So good on that, and kudos for the pitches. Internally, though, we chose Iona, pitch number 7, in order to fix not only a data quality and a data possibility issue, but also an employee experience frustration. So with those two angles covered, I think there's a merit here to move forward on this.
Amazing. And thank you for considering it. And everybody who knows me, who's seen me, knows that I'm a crier. So I'm trying to keep it together because this has just been an amazing opportunity. And this is, again, I encourage everybody to get involved with this kind of stuff take it, talk about it, make it a reality. This is how we do it, folks.
Huge congratulations, Joanna. That's a fantastic news. And Alistair, you're going to come back with our audience winner?
I am. I'm going to pull this up just quickly. So Alex, bring up that desktop and hopefully it will work. Hey, the winner is The Audience Agrees. Joanna, thank you so much for that and congratulations. And thank you everybody for playing along with this experimental technology. Becky, did you have something to add?
That was so much fun. It was madness and mayhem in the background and so much back and forth, but huge congratulations to you both. Judges, thank you so much for being part of this crazy adventure of ours and agreeing to champion these folks.
Huge thank you to the judges for deliberating in public and sharing your expertise on this, sharing your thoughts and your time in the near future. It's hugely appreciated. And a massive congratulations and thank you to everyone who pitched, because they took the time and are helping contribute, I think, to open government and enabling this environment for everyone.
And don't be surprised if you hear directly from some of us.